been about 2 weeks since I first released my video announcing that I'm going to make a Victoria 2 mod for the United States, and I just wanted to give you guys an update. So the first thing that I did was I updated some of the RGOs in the United States. I added more coal provinces to Pennsylvania, kind of just to buff Pennsylvania a little bit, because Pennsylvania historically was one of the greatest economic powers in the United States. I did change a lot of provinces to iron ones because what I find is that a lot of mods don't actually address the iron shortage. And so part of this is to reflect, the United States' natural resource endowment, but also to kind of help with the iron shortage that is often seen later in the game. And then I also changed some things down here in the south. Like, for example, Charleston makes coal now. They did not do that in the base game Victoria 2. I changed, Nashville didn't have an iron province. I think it was wheat, I believe. Kind of just to make Nashville more. Because Nashville, at least Tennessee, did have a lot of iron mining. Roanoke 2, changed that to an iron province. Another thing that I did is I got rid of Washington, D.C. as a state. The reason why I did this was just essentially make Maryland a little bit more powerful. I think that the state would be good for canned food. The whole purpose was just to make Maryland a more powerful state. But the second major change that I did is I actually updated the parties. In Victoria 2, the parties for the United States were basically completely wrong. And so what I did is I actually made them what they actually were. So for example, the Democrats are now laissez-faire. They support free trade, which they already did in the base game. I changed their religious policy to pluralism. I wasn't entirely sure if it should be pluralism, because at the same time, this is during the Second Great Awakening, and that was kind of like a bipartisan thing. So I was hesitant to change it to moralism, but that's what I made the Whigs here, and I figured that just to make them more separate, like during election events and everything. I also changed the Democratic citizenship policy to full citizenship. I was also a little hesitant here to do this because obviously the Democratic Party was not exactly, at least in the South, they were not very fond of immigrants, but in the North, those were their that was their main voting base up in the North. And of course, you have the Democrats' long history of kind of opposing civil rights and everything, at least until changed with the New Left in the 1960s, but that's something for a different time. Well, anyway, moving on to I didn't change much with the Whigs. I think I only changed one thing, but I don't quite remember what it was. Well, anyway, the Southern Democrats, I actually changed it to reflect what Southern Democrats would believe. Southern Democrats would not be in favor of state capitalism, as it is in base game Victoria 2. And of course, they would not be in favor of protectionism either, so that's why I changed it to free trade, because Southern Democrats were very big defenders of free trade. In fact, South Carolina, students of history, you'll know that they actually almost seceded during the Jackson administration over the issue of tariffs. So yeah, so I wanted to make the parties more accurate. That was always kind of my biggest issue with the United States. I mean, we obviously have a lot, that's why I'm making the mod. Now, when we go into reforms, in base game Victoria 2, the United States has trinket minimum wage. I got rid of that. I was thinking about keeping it because in the United States, wages were higher than that in Europe, but at the same time, the minimum wage didn't really exist until there were state minimum wages that were introduced during the Gilded Age, but there was not a federal minimum wage until the Great Depression with FDR and the New Deal. So essentially, I changed it to no minimum wage. And then another thing that I did is I changed it to basic school system, because in the base game, America has no school system. The reason why I did this is because the United States actually, believe it or not, today, maybe we've fallen off from this, but the United States did have a long tradition of emphasizing a basic education. And so a lot of a lot of young kids, even in rural areas, which is really amazing, would learn to read and write. They would learn. I think I read a biography about Daniel Boone once, and he was like on the frontier. I think he was from Kentucky. I don't quite remember. But anyway, even he who was on the rural frontier, he learned Greek, Latin, and so like obviously those not everybody learned those. Those were more for the elites because you were kind of expected to learn that, especially in like early America, because mostly because of the relationship to the Greek and the Roman republics. But anyway, America does actually have a long history of supporting a lot of basic education. And another thing that I did change was the literacy rate in the United States. Historically, the United States has always had a very high literacy rate. When the United States actually declared their independence, the literacy rate was around 25%. And that was among like the highest in the world. The only other nation that really compared with that would be Switzerland. And then right around this time, historically, the literacy rate was actually around 80% in most of the states. Which actually puts it on par with Scandinavia, who the Scandinavian countries, they have a lot. They are also well known for their education systems. So that was one of the things that I did. Another thing that I did was I actually decided to change the makeup of the upper house to kind of reflect what it was in 1836. So in 1836, essentially the Democrats were in charge. And they had roughly about 2/3 of Congress in their hands. And so essentially that's just what I did. It's a small change, not going to, it's not going to overly affect anything, but I believe in vanilla that the whole thing is just Democratic, even though that's not true. It's not going to change much, but it kind of just reflects kind of the more realistic part about America in 1936. Another thing that I did change was Manifest Destiny. I always had a problem with this, and I think a lot of Victoria 2 players had a problem with this, because it required Texas to be independent. Now, the only way for Texas to I've never seen Texas win on its own in Vanilla Victoria 2, even though they have like a level 6 defense general. I've never seen them win by themselves. And so essentially what the U.S. player has to do is they have to intervene in Texas, like literally in 1836. Of course, Victoria 2 players, you know that you're supposed to avoid early wars. So anyway, I changed that so that Texas does not have to exist. And what I do hope to do in the future is to kind of give like Texas some buffs, and I do wanna give some more modifiers and some more flavor to Mexico. Because obviously, during the 19th century, the United States and Mexico, they had an interesting relationship, especially around the timeline of World War I. So this mod isn't just for like the United States specifically. I mean, I'm gonna get into like Britain, France, Spain, of course, for the Spanish-American War, Russia. Of course, the whole point of this mod is to focus on the United States, not so much everyone else. But anyway, getting back to it. The changes that I did for Manifest Destiny made you require romanticism, and you require state and government. So this means that the United States can't do Manifest Destiny in like in 1837. Not exactly that. I don't think I would personally recommend to do that, but I guess you can do what you want. Anyway, I figured that state and government would be good because that's you'll get that maybe 1841, 1842. And then, of course, you get all of the inventions that go along with, like, ideological thought and state and government. I just figured it kind of made sense for that. And then, another thing you need, Prestige at least 50, that's in vanilla as well. And then, this is actually something that I like, personally. You either require that the ruling party is conservative or reactionary, or you require at least a 40% conservative or a 40% reactionary in the upper house. This kind of reflects that the Whig Party wasn't really too fond of westward expansion. There was a notable exception of the Oregon Territory. The Whigs were actually very much in favor of expanding into this area. However, down here, the Whigs were not overzealous to expand into this area over here. But anyway, so essentially, you just need to have either a ruling Democratic Party or just to have a coalition of conservatives and reactionaries in Congress. The reason why I did 40 is because obviously the Whig Party did vote for war with Mexico. Of course, they were very hesitant to do so, and everything. But of course, the Whig Party they were very hesitant to do such a thing. So anyway, so that's essentially the requirements for Manifest Destiny. And then when you enact this, I do want to give thanks to the Greater Flavor mod for giving, because I was trying to make my own war goal, and this is my first time making a mod, and let's just say I gave up after about an hour of trying to do it. That was too difficult. And so essentially, when you do Manifest Destiny, you get a war goal, and this actually applies to all nations now since it's in the game. You'll get a war goal to annex all of your core territories, because one of the problems with the United States in Victoria 2 is that you can never get all of your territories from Mexico in one war, and so you have to fight 2 wars to actually get them all. Well, anyway, in this mod, now you can just get it all with one war goal, and the war goal is going to cost 100. Now, the reason why it cost 100 is for 2 reasons. One, I'm not that skilled at modding. I don't know how to change that. And the second reason is just to make it more historical, because the United States was never going to annex any more than what it did, because the Whigs would have adamantly opposed that, and they did. In fact, the Whigs, in particular, John Quincy Adams, he was the biggest critic of the Mexican-American War, and he advocated for the complete return to status quo. Even like in 1848, like he did not want to take any territory. So anyway, the whole point of it is just so the United States player doesn't take Mexico City, for example, because that's it's not realistic. But of course, in the future, actually something I would like to do. My modding skills suck, so I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this, but something that I would like to do is to actually give the option to annex more territory. But that would come at the cost of great political instability and even possible civil war, because after the Mexican-American War, there was the Compromise of 1850, in which the United States actually did almost have a civil war. So definitely not too unrealistic, but that is something I do want to look into. And then moving on, another thing that I did is I added mechanical production to the United States. The reason why I did this was just kind of to give the United States industry a buff. I mean, it's not that big of a buff. It's only mechanical production. And the other reason why I added is because the United States, Americans actually invented some of these stuff. Like, for example, the mechanical reaping machine, and that was already in large use in 1836. Of course, you could make that argument for basically every nation for at least one of these technologies. For Prussia, you can make the argument that they had experimental railroad and whatever. But anyway, I just did that to give the United States a small buff. Another thing that I did is I actually changed the number of craftsmen in several areas. So, for example, in New York, I doubled it from 6,000 to 12,000. Whole reason for this is kind of just to give American industry a little bit of buff. As you can see here, America is second in industrial power. I believe in vanilla they start at third. I can't confirm that. But obviously Democrats are in charge, so that's going to quickly fall because of the laissez-faire policy. And then I believe that is all the changes that I have done so far. Some things that I do want to do in the future is I would like to add a Panic of 1837 modifier. I think that would be kind of cool, because Jackson with his Specie Circular Act, and of course I believe there were some banks abroad in the UK that also led to the Panic of 1837, but it was mostly a lot of the policies under Jackson and of course speculation. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to add, and one thing that I can't seem to figure out how to add is a modifier that would essentially be with the United States throughout the whole game. The whole point of the modifier is to increase American population growth, because the American population, ever since it was settled in well, not ever since it was settled, but since like I think it was like 1700, for about 100, probably about until I would say 1900 or so, the American population doubled roughly every 25 years, and so I kind of wanted to mimic that in the game. Of course, a lot of that was due to immigration, but I find that in vanilla, the United States doesn't actually receive a lot of immigration, or at least enough immigration to represent that. So something I will do is kind of to maybe change some flavor in some of these countries, or maybe change. Or one thing I actually do want to do is I know in several mods, like when you pass universal voting or something like that, the immigration attraction is much higher. That is something I do want to do at some point. That'll probably actually be the next thing that I do. And then I believe that's essentially all I have planned for now. I mean, I'm going to go in chronological order. I do have a lot. I do have a lot planned. Like, for example, Reconstruction is going to be very in-depth, because Reconstruction was a pretty important time in American history, and Victoria 2 does not really represent that at all. But anyway, another thing I do want to do is, of course, change life ratings, some provinces, maybe add a couple railroads. But anyway, in the immediate, just gonna maybe touch up Mexico, Texas, and then probably work my way until 1850, and then I'll probably release another video about that update. So in conclusion, some major changes, just RGOs. I changed Manifest Destiny. I changed a few bit of technologies, changed the literacy, and I added some craftsmen. And then I believe that's all that I have done. I don't quite remember anything else. Oh, of course, the party changes. But anyway, that's all I've done so far, and I hope to do more very soon. I do plan on sticking with this. I'm really bad at modding, so I'm not really entirely sure how to do some things, but I'm trying to learn, and then hopefully I can learn them soon.